Hi, my name's Michael Duffy. I'm co-presenter of a program called Counterpoint on Radio National, which is one of the sponsors of the festival and which in fact is recording this session for broadcast in a few weeks. Thanks for being here. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Opera House and the St James Ethics Centre. The empty chair we have down the end here symbolises an imprisoned writer who's unable to be with us today. In Tibet, internet writer and editor Kunchok Sefal Gopi Sang has been held without charge since February, probably because of the work he's been doing online. And in fact, his Tibetan language website has been shut down several times in 2007 and 2008. My job is to introduce our speakers, who will speak for 10 minutes each, and then we're going to have 20 minutes of questions from you. And I'll try and keep my introduction short because I'm sure most of you have read about them already in the program, and we've only got an hour, so every second counts. Dr. Alex, we're going to start with Norm Stamper here. We've just changed the order. Who is a former police chief of Seattle. He arrived here this morning. I know the long flight across the Pacific can be a shock to those who haven't made it before, but talking to Norman just now, he's in fine form. I know he's going to talk of many things. I'm particularly looking forward to what he's got to say about the drug war's effect on police, which is something we don't hear much about in this country. I think it's very important. Alex Wodak is Director of the Alcohol and Drug Service at St Vincent's Hospital and President of the Australian Law Reform Association, Drug Law Reform. He's possibly the best known advocate of reform in Australia, and as one who agrees with much of what he's been saying, I'd like to take this chance to thank him. I know he's been doing this for a long time, and I know that in a professional sense the positions he's taken haven't always been without their dangers. Greg Barnes is a lawyer, a commentator, and a former policy advisor to state and federal Liberal politicians. Now, I haven't actually asked Greg if he ever sought to advise them on this particular issue, but if he did, I suspect that the Australia's Liberals would have pulled their well-known two-card trick and suddenly changed back into Conservatives. Okay, would you please join me in welcoming Norm Stamper.
Thank you very much. It's delightful to be here. It is my first trip to Australia, and I've been looking forward to it for at least 3 or 4 months. When Richard Nixon declared war on drugs in 1971 in my country, he really wasn't declaring war on substances. He was declaring war on people, disproportionately young people, people of color, and poor people. And he put the nation's police at the federal, state, and local level on the front lines of that war. So for almost 4 decades now, we have been prosecuting this so-called war on drugs. We have spent $1 trillion US prosecuting this war. Each year, we incarcerate millions of people, approximately 2 million people, for non-violent drug offenses, which means over the course of the years, we have jailed literally tens of millions of Americans for non-violent drug offenses. What do we have to show for that? Drugs are today more readily available at lower prices and higher levels of potency than when Richard Nixon pronounced all drugs public enemy number 1 and declared all-out war on them. I grew up in San Diego, California. I spent, some say misspent, a good part of my youth south of the border. I have a real fondness and many wonderful memories of Tijuana, Rosarito Beach, Ensenada, San Quintin. I love Mexico, and it breaks my heart to see what is happening to the people of Mexico as a function of prohibition, which produces, without fail, violence and police corruption. And that's a very good characterization of what is going on south of the U.S. border. And I dare say in 230 cities in the United States, which today play host to Mexican drug cartels, their influence is reaching deeper and deeper into my country. The prosecution of a drug war in support of prohibition produces certain inevitable results, one of which I've mentioned is violence. Looking just cursorily at the violence that we've seen with the roughly 14,000 people who've been killed in the last 3 or 4 years from Tijuana to Matamoros, that level of violence is outrageous as it stands, but the nature of the violence has become truly inhuman. Torture is preceding assassinations. The drug cartels, because they're dealing with enormous, obscene, untaxed profits, feel that they must arm themselves to expand or protect those markets and their profits. And globally, we're looking at a $500 billion industry, illicit drug industry. So when they decide that they need to protect or to expand their markets, they send a message to rival drug cartels, to street traffickers, to snitches, informants, and they send a message to the police. And the police message is very simple. You either cooperate with us or we will kill you. We will kill you and or members of your family. We will behead you. We will literally toss your headless body in a very public setting, and we'll roll your head like a bowling ball into a restaurant or into a civic gathering. And we will, in fact, send a message to anyone who thinks that he or she or they can create a rival cartel or refuse to cooperate in the intricate and very complex syndicated crime that is drug trafficking. The corruption of which I speak is deeply saddening to me as a police officer, as a 34-year veteran in police work, first 28 years in San Diego, the last 6 as Seattle's police chief. Is very hard for me to even reflect on, but it needs to be spoken about. It needs to be spoken about very openly. If you're a police officer working a beat and you are, for example, character challenged, you might slip into somebody's pocket and pull out half a bag of cannabis. Convert that cannabis to your own use, or use it to set yourself up in business and to actually find yourself competing against drug traffickers. Some police departments in the United States have been afflicted by police officers who have set themselves up a drug trafficking business. They have created markets for the drugs that they steal. They do everything in their power, obviously, to stay below the radar, and they rely on people's unwillingness to come forward and say, this police officer took my drugs. So they know they're dealing with a very vulnerable population. We've had police officers in big cities across the United States who have not only stolen those drugs, set themselves up in business, they've engaged in some of the same behavior that we've seen coming from the Mexican cartels. They are engaged in extortion and bribery and kidnapping, and in some rare instances, even murder. And these are police officers who, from one city to the next, have operated with virtual impunity. I don't believe there is a city in the United States that has been untouched by drug-related police corruption. So no matter how you look at this issue, prohibition, which is the organizing mechanism, if you will, behind the drug war, inevitably produces violence because of the hugely inflated profits, and invites corruption, not just from the police, but from other government officials. It is far worse in Mexico than it is in the United States. The vast majority of police officers in the United States are not character challenged in the way that I'm describing, and they do not succumb to the temptation. They don't get seduced by that easy money. But many of those police officers, tragically, have found it justifiable to violate the civil liberties of their fellow Americans, which I deem a form of corruption. Unlawful searches and seizures, our Fourth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, ensures that every American is entitled to that protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. And yet police officers engaged in this war against drugs, this war against their fellow citizens, find oftentimes that the means does justify the ends. It's real important, I think, for those of us who care about keeping drugs away from our children, who care about honest police work, who care about healthy and safe communities, to understand that the drug war has caused far more harm than good. And in fact, is now, I think, for the first time in my professional life, sitting on the cusp of major reform. We're starting to see it globally, and I think it's a very encouraging thing that we here tonight are talking about this issue. My 10 minutes are up. I saw the warning light. I'll sit down. Thank you very much.